Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. I hope you are having an amazing day so far. My day is going pretty good weather-wise. Weather-wise, it is amazing. It is hot. If you see me lift my arm and there's a big sweat patch there, you'll know exactly how hot it is. So I do apologize if that does happen throughout the video. On the downside, we have no internet. For the second time in a freaking week, we have no internet. And it's amazing how much you miss something when it's not there. You know, all of a sudden I've got 20 different things I need to do that are all online and I'm a bit screwed. I've got data on my phone. So I'm all right there, and luckily I have YouTube Premium, so I've downloaded a load of videos that I can watch offline, so in case this ever happens. So that's what we're going to be doing. Today we are reacting to, could the US military conquer the UK if it wanted to? Now this is a recommendation from Scorpo Sayings. I'll stick the comment up now, and it came through, and it was one of the last videos I downloaded before the internet stopped, so I thought, you know what, we're going to check that one out today. I've had a few emails and comments from people who've actually emailed me suggestions in the last few months, and they're like, why haven't you done them yet? I do apologize. I am going to get through to them. I'm not going to open it now. I've got a spreadsheet that I've made, and it's literally pages and pages of recommendations with the link and your name next to it. So I will get to them. I promise you I will get to them. I am not ignoring you. There's just so many hours in a day, and I have got other things I need to do. I do apologize. I will get to them, I promise you. Any hoops, if you guys haven't done so already, please make sure you hit the subscribe button. And if you're feeling extra frisky, you may as well hit the like button as well. We are so close to that 10,000. That is my goal by the 2nd of August, which is my birthday. So come on, make this old man happy and hit that subscribe button, please. I do have a Buy Me a Coffee page that's linked down in the description if you want to buy a coffee to help support the channel. That would be freaking awesome of you. But again, please do not feel any obligation to do that. Rather treat a loved one. Take out your missus or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your loved one or even your kids and get them a coffee, get them a drink. That's awesome as well. Please don't feel any obligation to do so. I also have a Patreon page, which is linked down in the description. I'm trying to upload there daily. I'm busy working on like an 8-part series for there that will come out hopefully next week. It's taking a lot of time because I have to keep starting with my camera. I've explained yesterday, and I'm waffling on too much again. You don't want to sit here and hear me talk for too long. So without further ado, let's get into, could the US military conquer the UK if it wanted to? You'll notice I've skipped to 123 because I skipped the sponsor.
And now, could US military successfully invade UK if it wanted to? Some rules will apply. US gets no overseas bases and all other countries are impassable. Distance from US to UK mainland is pretty big, especially when reaching London. Before trying to land any troops, the seas must first be clear of British ships, and Royal Air Force must be suppressed. US has a massive advantage when it comes to naval assets. Basically, all of
We actually did a video 2 days ago. Was it Sunday or was it yesterday about the difference in the navies? And I was shocked. For one, I thought each country would have a lot more, but then I didn't realize how much more the US has in comparison to the UK. Luckily, they are allies though.
of its assets are made for oceans and could operate near UK if needed. While the Americans would need to sail to and from Britain, taking weeks away from their actual presence, US Navy could pretty much do whatever it pleases near the UK. It's interesting to point out that most of US ships do not carry anti-ship missiles. US Navy prefers to use their carriers for such missions. British Royal Navy is to go down a similar route. Their Harpoon missiles are old and set to be retired soon. Not all ships have them. Only a minor part of the British fleet has modern air defense systems. Basically, the sea war would be fought above the sea and under it, but the British lacked anti-ship missiles for its aircraft. Furthermore, British Tornado aircraft ceased to train for the anti-ship missions almost 2 decades ago. Basically, if UK
I think I stated in the beginning of this that this video is from 2019. It was a request, so it is a little bit outdated. I'm hoping they'll do an updated one so we can check it out.
had to try and do air raids against US fleet, it would be down to 2 weapons: laser-guided bombs and short-range tactical missiles. Brimstone in particular might be the weapon of choice. While its warhead is tiny, Brimstone 2 has a decent range. Still, against dozens of potent destroyers designed to deal with many anti-ship missiles at once, it's unlikely UK could do much. British best bet would be their submarines. They're fairly modern. Theoretically, the British could use their ballistic missile subs as attack subs as well, and speed up the entry into service of another astute sub, while keeping one Trafalgar running a bit longer, rummaging for retired sailors to crew it. Still, the British would be far outnumbered. US submarine fleet dwarfs theirs. Given a bit less time on station and British home advantage when it comes to resupply, the balance of power may not be quite 6-1. Still, it's no question the British subs would get hunted down within months. Aerial anti-submarine platforms would also play a large role. And while the British could use all their assets, even
Holy
just
crap. US total aerial anti-sub assets 460 MH/SH-60 Seahawk helicopters. British ones 41 helicopters. What the hell? The US 69 P-8 Poseidon planes. UK no fixed wing ASW platforms yet. I think the UK is looking a bit outgunned.
deployable portion of US assets would be enough to
Holy
force the British
smokes.
subs into hiding. Furthermore, US carrier-based air power would make it hard for British anti-sub helicopters to operate. The main force projection would be done by US carriers, naturally. US could choose whether to use more carriers initially and then have less available later on, or to maintain a smaller number on constant patrol. To defeat the British Air Force, the former is more likely. US nominally has 11 carriers, but only 9 air wings. It does have an additional support wing, which is a lot bigger. It may be the source of 1 or 2 more combat wings.
Something we haven't gone into in any of these videos, and it's something I've always wondered. If something like this, God forbid this ever happens, please just realize this is like a hypothetical video. Obviously, I don't want this to happen. Please just know that. But during wartime or time when all this is going on, when your planes are getting taken out, or your tanks or your ships, how fast can they be reproduced? How fast can the military replace those planes from scratch? So say for example they send out, I'm just spitting out a number here. Say for example they send out 60 planes on an attack mission, and 45 of those planes get taken out completely. Now I know that's an outrageous number, but you know, things happen. How long will it take? And I've lifted my arms twice. I apologize if you see my sweaty pits. But how long will it take for those planes to be reproduced from nothing? Or do they initially start, like if they're starting and they're like, right, we need to ramp up production, we need to get more planes back up here? Or do they wait for... It's something I've always wondered. I'm assuming if something does kick off, they've already got stuff going on, like in the pipeline. But that scares me, man. Imagine they're like, yeah, we'll be fine, and then everything is taken out.
After some months of preparation. But crews aren't the only issue. Lifespan of a carrier necessarily involves lengthy maintenance periods. Important to note is that the deployable
6
period
months
doesn't mean the
maintenance.
carrier can actually be on a mission the whole time.
That makes sense.
Usually 1 or 2 deployments are made during those 18 months. Missions are usually 6 to 8 months long, and several months are needed to prep the carrier and its wing for another mission. Shorter missions might give
Hold on, sorry. Dry dock, yeah. 36 to 40 months. Midlife refit / modernization. That's crazy, isn't
more
it?
deployments in the short term, but in the long term they would require even more maintenance for every month spent out at sea. Because of all that, it's unrealistic US would send out more than 6 carriers at once, after a few months of prep time. Similar issues would affect the aviation assault ships. Perhaps 4 to 6 could be deployed at once, after some preparations. Grand total of combat planes US Navy and Marine Corps could muster in a few months long air campaign is thus smaller than the total number of US planes. US might fly in fresh planes to replace ones that got lost. Flying them over the ocean to a carrier would be doable. What could the British respond with? Royal Air Force is smaller than even the readily available US planes deployed on carriers. Another huge issue for the British
What is
could be
with this
their lack of
puppet?
air defenses. Everything they currently have are
What the His mouth's not even moving in time. I haven't watched him, and now when he came up I was like, let me have a look at this little green dude. Is it a lizard or a
fairly
frog?
low altitude
Lizard
systems,
by the tongue,
meaning
I
the
think.
US would be free to bomb them from high up with guided weapons. UK would also suffer the US cruise missile barrage. While the Brits have some such missiles of their own, it's unlikely they would be used against the faraway US bases. Even the subs that could carry them would be better utilized for defense of the homeland. While not all could be launched at once, US could sustain the effort. The British Air Force would be mostly paralyzed on the ground. US has also a much bigger recon platform fleet, especially when it comes to satellites. British lack those, as in the real world they timeshare some US spy satellites. US aircraft would be looking for targets as well. Britain would have no real means of scouting the US bases. US AWACS type planes would be plentiful, while British ones would mostly be trapped on the ground, with runways and highways being mostly inoperative. Thus the Royal Air Force would slowly get destroyed on the ground. When they would be able to get some planes airborne, they still may not choose to engage the Americans, as it's likely US attack waves would be made of close to 100 planes with possibly as many fighters as Britain would muster per each local interception, or more. The best Britain could hope for would be a roughly equal kill ratio in the air, and when the losses on the ground are included over months of a protracted bombing
Losses during the first 6 months. Dozens to 100 planes lost in the air, 100 plus planes lost on the ground, probably.
campaign, US would still be left with a sizable force. All this didn't even include the US Air Force. While the scenario requires it to use the bases inside the US, Britain could be reached. At first, bombers would be deploying cruise missiles, but later on they would be likely used for bombing missions. But could the Air Force tactical plane fleet help out as well? With very ample in-flight refueling, the answer is yes. US operates the world's biggest air tanker fleet. The Hercules-based tankers, however, are too small and would use most of the fuel just to get near Britain. Still, the remainder of the fleet has a substantial fuel offload capacity, and tankers could refuel each other. Such ops may sound complex, but compared to what the British did in Falklands War, they're fairly basic. The British used a dozen tankers to refuel themselves repeatedly, keeping the bomber refueled throughout all of the route. While all of the tanker fleet would not be available due to maintenance, the rest could still offload significant fuel loads just outside Britain.
I can tell you something now. It's a freaking good thing I'm not planning any other stuff. Like, I'm not in charge of anything like that, because I'm so, like, the amount of brain power it would take to just plan something like this is insane.
If needed. With several refuelings per plane, US Air Force could still expect to have around 400 combat planes in action practically every day. The British would really have no chance in the air. Within months, the US would have complete control of the air. And thus the second phase of the invasion might commence. By that time, British ships would be mostly dead, even if they hugged the shores and just aided in the air defenses. British submarines might hold out a bit longer, if not being used to actively hunt down US ships. But even if British subs managed to kill 2 US vessels for each of their own, final result would be the end of the Royal Navy. So at around 6 months or so into the war, the landings would be mostly unopposed, except for the Royal Army defending the shores. 6 months would be enough for US to assemble pretty much all of their active and reserve assets. In addition to landing ships, US could count on numerous cargo assets of its Sea Lift Command and Reserve Fleet in case a port is secured. US Airborne could also help, with the numbers shown probably growing with newly trained paratroopers. Getting additional heavier equipment for them, however, would not be likely, given the time limit. US transport plane fleet is pretty big and should be able to drop all the airborne troops within days. US could be looking at close to 30,000 troops during the first day and close to 20,000 more the day after. Subsequent days would see fewer and fewer troops being added and more supplies being brought in. The British would enjoy more soldiers than shown before. The reserve mentioned covers only the soldiers receiving some training periodically and soldiers for whom some heavy equipment is stored. In an event of a total war, Britain would be using those 6 months to mobilize as many soldiers as possible. While they would be equipped with basically just rifles, and while their training would be less than adequate, they would still boost the overall numbers several times.
Basically cannon fodder, isn't it? It's what a lot of the wars, World War One and Two, like especially one, where they brought the restrictions down over time. They first, like, you had to be over a certain age. It was crazy. They basically just used as cannon fodder.
Yet all those soldiers may not be enough, as UK has a problem of geography. Its landmass is just too large. Its coastline is very long. Even when taking just the western part of its coastline into account, the area to be defended is huge. And what about the islands? perfect for US to take and entrench themselves at, before launching further landings from them. Most of those areas are sufficiently far away from the mainland that British artillery would not be much of a factor. And what about Northern Ireland? There are just too many places for US to concentrate its assault on. The British would not be able to move their forces around easily and protect those islands or the Northern Ireland. So the islands would fall one by one. Then either Northern Ireland would be taken or part of Great Britain would fall. Hard to traverse overland Scotland would be an obvious choice, though that would also slow down US breakthrough as well later on. Cornwall or Devon are also decent picks, as British defenders lack room to swoop down on the US beachhead from all directions, though such areas would likely be more heavily populated by British military to begin with. Once the US manages to secure ports and airfields and brings in US Army reinforcements, it would be basically game over for the British. US would build up its helicopter force on the areas it
609 heavy, 66 heavy. Look at the numbers. Holy crap. 281 medium, 25 medium. 1,780 81 utility, 42 utility. 341 light utility, 46 light. This is insane. The total is 3,012 and the UK's total is 203. Total capacity over 45,000 troops. Total capacity over 3,500 troops.
has taken,
it's insane numbers.
which is considerable.
Thankfully, this is not happening.
While the British have a fleet of their own to help quickly distribute its forces where needed, their numbers are small. Both sides would of course be losing many helicopters, US to British low-level air defenses and British to US fighter cover, which would continuously be flying over the important areas. The British would have only a small part of shown inventory of heavy weapons present at any one point the US attacks. While US would also not be disembarking thousands of its Abrams tanks or 10,000 of other heavy combat vehicles, the overwhelming fire support coming from various directions would more than make up for it. Fire support from the ships may come in form of MLR units firing from the ships rather than actual gun barrage. US ships still lack long-range gun rounds. Attack helicopters are another way of concentrating force in one area quickly, but again the British are far outmatched, even if just half of US numbers are present. The issue for the Americans would be time. As the scenario asks what can be achieved within 1 year, US would be under pressure to progress from their multiple beachheads. Northern Ireland is likely to fall within the 1-year time limit, but only minor parts of the Great Britain would be overrun by the Americans during the same time period. The British would put up a hell of a fight. Ground troop loss ratio would favor the British somewhat, but when Air Force and Navy losses are added in, where Britain would suffer more heavily, the US would come out fine. With added large chunks of conquered territory, the US could call itself a victor. Big thanks.
Right, let me know what you think down in the comments. I pray that none of this stuff ever happens, but it's really interesting to see the numbers and everything. I mean, that was quite involved. I'll probably have to go back and watch it again just to get my head around things a bit better, because it's insane, isn't it? It's crazy to even think that something like that could possibly happen one day. You never know anymore. Look at all this nonsense that's going on here locally near me. So yeah, it's pretty scary, but I don't think about stuff like that. I don't watch the news. Like, I never watch the news. My missus will always be like, oh, did you see on the news? Don't tell me. I don't care. If it's not affecting me right now, or it's not going to affect my kids, I don't want to know. I'm like an ostrich. Keep my head in the sand. I don't believe anything they're telling me. I'll make my own mind up from I'm going to go too far and say something I shouldn't. But yeah, I try and make my own mind up about things. I don't follow politics or anything like that. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. I'm hoping our internet comes on again quite soon. But if it doesn't, such is life. Anyway, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace. Armpit smoke, sweat.